Hey, everybody. Welcome to this Harvard Chan School of Public Health Center for Health Communication Creative Briefing. That's a lot to say. We are so excited to have you all here today as part of Harvard Chan's creator program that empowers an alliance between public health and creators like you. And so to give you a sense of how this is going to go, we are going to run through some introductions first. I'm myself and Emily, and then we are going to spend about 15 to 20 minutes going into the science before we get into audience questions, which I'm really excited about. All the information that we discussed today is going to be shared in an accompanying toolkit that Harvard has so graciously been willing to send out after this briefing. And then also, please feel free to drop questions in the comment section as they arise as we're talking, and we will get to those during my favorite part, which is the Q&A portion. I am Destiny Ann. I am a creator. I am a mom. I am a parenting coach. And I have been doing content creation for so long as I've been an entrepreneur in different spaces. And content creation to me just means an opportunity for me to express myself in a way that keeps me connected to other people. And so I absolutely love this. I eat and breathe content creation all day long. And I am specifically excited to be here today with this intersection of public health and content, because it helps me to feel more empowered to be able to do what I love to do, which is to connect and to provide value. And so specifically the space that I am in as a coach, it is so important to me to have up-to-date information, to be aware of what's going on in our communities, and to be able to just provide the best, most valuable content possible. So I think that it is so great that you all are here, that you believe in those things as well. And I am specifically excited about this conversation on tech and on teens because my daughter, she's a preteen, but she is moving into that phase, and we are absolutely navigating tech right now. I'm a millennial. I grew up with tech being new. It was like the Wild Wild West. And so I didn't necessarily have the best tools. And so it is really exciting that she is going through this, and I can do this with her from a more empowered space. And so I'm excited to be having this conversation today with Dr. Weinstein, founding co-director at the New Center for Digital Thriving at Harvard. She has been researching teens' experiences with social media for over a decade, since we were in a world before TikTok, right? And right as Snapchat was coming out. She is deeply passionate about amplifying young voices in research spaces, and she co-wrote the book behind their screens, excuse me, what teens are facing and adults are missing, with her longtime colleague, Carrie James. And she is also a mom of two kids, just like me. And I am so excited to get to talk with her about this today, especially since it is such a challenging area that I am navigating. I'm sure many of us are navigating as parents and just caregivers and non-parents alike. So welcome, Dr. Weinstein, and thank you for having this conversation with me today.
Thank you so much, Destiny. Thanks for that intro. And thanks to Harvard Chan for having us. And I think thanks also to everyone who's joining this briefing. Your interest in helping your communities with this topic is really so meaningful. We founded the Center for Digital Thriving because we really believe in a future where everyone can thrive as we live with new technologies. But we know that the path to get there is going to require good insights, not just good intentions, and good research that amplifies teens' voices and fuels recommendations that are actually helpful, insights that real families and schools can start using right now. So we're going to talk about that today and some of those insights. But before we go there, I wanted to just say two quick things. The first is that there's a lot of real lived expertise in this audience. So I know as creators, you're constantly figuring out for yourselves how to get the benefits of tech while also managing the challenges, thinking about your own boundaries. This topic is personal in different ways for all of us. And my hope is that in the conversation today and in the toolkit that we put together for you that has more of the research to cite and to reference, we just can help you have a more solid grounding and really boost your impact as you continue to share with your communities. So thanks for the opportunity to help you all do that. The second thing I want to acknowledge is that there is a lot of fear right now about teens and tech, and it is really easy to stoke that fear. But those scary headlines don't usually capture the nuance that we're actually seeing in research studies and in real families. And the fear-based narratives can actually shut down or close off important conversations. So I'm really excited to be with you today. And I know we're going to focus on actually opening up conversations that many teens are needing and many adults are really craving.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're actually starting there, because I think that that fear-based narrative has been something that I have definitely seen, and something that has been a part of us and our journey with tech. And I'm all about empowering myself, empowering my community. And I think that you having research that can kind of allow us to be more educated is a great way for us to kind of like diminish some of that fear. So what kind of reframe is justified by the research when it comes to tech?
Yeah, so I think it's worth saying, just as a starting point, that social media can be a lifeline for some teens, and it can feel like the worst part of life for others. And even just making space for teens to talk to us about that whole spectrum of their experiences really helps us have more honest conversations. And those kinds of more honest conversations, research that actually captures the full spectrum, that's actually an intervention in and of itself, because when we create space, we actually get more insight into what's hard for kids and what kinds of support they need, as well as what's going well. So our team often says tech is both, because it's a really helpful reminder that it's both helpful and harmful, both connecting and dividing, both feeding inspiration and feeding insecurity. And I think this frame is really important. It's also a reality that we live in an attention economy, meaning that tech companies generate profit when we spend more time on their apps. They're not usually designing for our agency or for our fulfillment in life. So things like endless feeds and autoplay, they give us infinite content, but they're not infinitely valuable unless maybe you're a designer whose goal is to just keep everyone scrolling longer. So I think that recognizing, number one, tech is both, but also number two, that it's designed and design isn't neutral. I think those are really important frames. And Destiny, I'm wondering for you, like, how does this idea that tech is both come up in your life, in your content creation? How do you see it playing out?
It's so funny because I like definitely see the alignment here. I'm always like, you got to get you some, and like life is about duality. And when I first started content creation, I think I was really like in a very specific space. Like there was very content that's polarizing, right? Like it's very attractive and you'll get a lot of views and you'll get a lot of people coming to you. But when I was like, no, I want to build community, I had to be more intentional about the fact that there is so much and there's so much nuance. And that shows up in my parenting, but it definitely shows up in content creation, because we have to be willing to understand that like two things can be true at one time. And being able to navigate that and express language on my content has really allowed my community to look so very diverse. Similar values, yes, but we're able to have communications and conversations. I'm able to provide more value when I'm not leaning into these polarizing views with my content.
I so appreciate that. And I feel like you also talk about these 4 Cs, which maybe we should talk through, because I think they also align with some of the mind shifts that we've been really seeing as justified and warranted by the research. Will you talk everyone through what those are?
Yes, absolutely. So from my book, Very Intentional Parenting, my 4C framework is communication, curiosity, collaboration, and connection. And they are how I show up to conflict, but just in a proactive stance, they are how I show up to parenting. And just considering those things, anytime that a conflict comes up, I'm very intentional about connection with my kids. I'm very intentional about being curious, showing up from a curious space. And so when it comes to tech, you're not even going to know if, you know, the way that tech is impacting your child, if you're just coming in with those fears and you're like, this is the impact. And without curiosity, then we can't lean into that other C, which is collaboration. And specifically with teens, collaboration is so important because they are in a stage and a phase in their life where they are starting to re-examine everything, and we have an opportunity to either disempower them or empower them. And so when we lean into tech in a collaborative way, it really does empower them to make sound choices, because we're not always going to be around and we cannot dictate every single thing that they're doing with tech. So I think that that's really important.
Yeah, I know. It feels like so much of the way the research is being talked about in the public sphere right now is pushing adults and parents into this role of being just like referees, where it's like our only job is to blow the whistle when kids are over screen time, or issue a consequence like a penalty when they do something wrong. And the reality is that there is so much that's complicated about growing up with technology today. And kids really need us to be more like coaches and less like refs. So more like coaches means we are helping kids actually practice and build skills. We're creating thoughtful boundaries. We're strategizing with them in hard moments, like when someone sends something in their group chat that raises a red flag and they're like, I don't know what to do about this. Like those things come up. And I think this kind of coaching mindset is so meaningful, but especially because you can be a teen essentially doing everything right and still have real dilemmas that are coming up as you navigate social media, or even if you're not using social media, as you just navigate like texting. And so opening those lines of communication, that's so meaningful. And it also makes me think about so many teens who have told us that is just absolutely what they want from their parents. They want this recognition that they're trying hard and that sometimes things go wrong, but like they want their parents to know, like, I'm good, I'm a good kid and I'm trying, and this is really hard.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. That kind of just like makes me a little sad to hear that about teens, but also it's really empowering. I hope if you do have a teen to hear like that is something that they genuinely desire. Like our kids don't want to make, quote unquote, bad decisions. They don't want to disappoint us. They really genuinely have a desire to work with us, and we have to be willing to do that as well. And I love the idea of coaching and not refereeing. Like just the idea of refereeing, it almost sounds like, hey, these are the rules, and I'm just here to tell you whether or not you're doing it right. That's it. I'm not here to actually help you. I'm not here to teach you or empower you. I'm just here, like you said, to blow the whistle. And I'm just really glad that I have had the opportunity with my daughter to not come from that space as of recent, because previously I know that was the space that I've been in, but we have check-ins. We spoke about this. Like I have tech check-ins with my daughter, and we recently had to have a tech check-in. And basically, things were going a certain way. And like you said, it doesn't even matter. Something's going to come up. There's going to be some sort of conflict. And we had a conflict. And so we had to come back and revisit. But that was an opportunity where I could have been like, hey, full stop, hard stop. We're not doing this. Screen time. Give me the phone, put it away, all of that. But exactly. But I said, you know what? We need to sit down and have a talk and reevaluate how this is currently impacting you. And I asked her some of the things that you spoke about earlier. I was like, what is the benefit of your phone? How is this helping you? And she's like, well, it helps me connect with my cousins, or I get to be creative in this way. And just imagine if I were refereeing and not coaching, and basically stripping her of the opportunity to do things that are positive behaviors that impact her in a positive way. So I absolutely love the idea of coach, don't referee. Is there anything else from the research on screen time that you think would be helpful for parents to keep in mind?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, first of all, I love that example. I want to ask you more questions about that. I also want to just say that I think you had a really interesting instinct that it carries through a lot of the resources that the Center for Digital Thriving creates. And that's that you started the conversation, even though you wanted to talk about something hard or some of the things that weren't going well, you started by asking about the good stuff. And this is such a powerful pivot because it actually just creates space. First of all, we often learn something new when we ask, like, what's something that's going well, or what's a tech habit that's working for you. But it also signals to teens that we get that there are positives that coexist with the challenges, and that we know that there's some stuff that they're trying and that might be going really well. And I think so often we just jump right into the let's talk about the problem, but you actually set the whole tone for that conversation in that very first opening question that you asked. So I just love that. And we actually have a couple of resources on talking about habits that I think someone can probably drop in the chat that are literally starting with exactly that, like the positive question as a way into designing a challenge to take on a habit that's not working for you. So I'll talk about screen time, but I think that that's just, I love hearing your instincts there.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
on the screen time question, research is really telling us that I think there's a lot in the public about screen time, right? Like that's a word that all of us have heard at this point. Research is really telling us that there are 3 things that really matter beyond just the number of minutes that kids are spending on their phones or that we're spending on our phones. And those are, you can think about them as what else, and what's tough. So what are kids actually doing during screen time? We know that content really matters, but that often gets kind of lost in the conversation. But you can probably think of a time when you spent like 20 minutes on your phone and felt really crummy after, and a time when you spent the exact same number of minutes and felt really great after. And that's partly because of what you were doing during that time. So thinking about the content and how we feel after. The second is what else? So what else are kids not doing because they're on their screen? What is it replacing or displacing? And there's just a difference between like, okay, it's just replacing some downtime when I'd be watching TV versus like it's completely displacing sleep. And we all know that sleep is key for kids' development. So what is it? That's number two. What else? And then the third thing is what's tough. And this is something that we really see across a bunch of different studies, that kids' vulnerabilities are amplified by tech in very different ways. And in some cases, they're actually helped by tech in different ways too. So what's tough is a question to ask ourselves, like, what is tough for my specific kid? And most of us can probably answer that. Like, are they struggling with self-regulation and we need to give them a little more support around habits? Do they struggle more with comparison? And we need to be especially alert to that around social media. Are they struggling with body image, kind of in the same category? Or maybe it's something totally different, like they're having really complicated social issues with their friends or with their classmates offline. And we know that those things can carry over to the ways that they're using tech. So what else and what's tough? Those are three questions about screen time that take us beyond just thinking about the number of minutes.
I love reframe so much. I love it so much. And I think that we kind of, in my home, have found our way to that. But man, if I had that framework when we first started, goodness, that would have been incredible. I love how you broke that down. Thank you so much. I think specifically there is so much information out of like, this is the right amount of time. And if it's more than that, X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And something that's really important to me in living in that like nuance and duality is that you have to parent the child that's like right in front of you. And my kids are completely different. Like an hour and my youngest is feral. I mean, hour screen time. My
Yeah.
oldest can watch screen time for so much longer. And so, or can have screen time for so much longer. And so I think that a lot of times I was just focused on the what, like what are they actually consuming? And parents will get stuck there. Like, well, it should be Bluey and how many screen changes and blah, blah, blah. Right? Or it has to be educational, but that's not collaborative. The what else piece, I think, is probably also really helpful and impactful for parents to be able to dialogue with their children. And that's so empowering to, I imagine if I asked my daughter, like, well, when you're on your screen, what are the other things that, are being neglected or that you could be doing? And then lastly, what was the last one?
What else? What's tough?
And what's tough? Okay, so the what's tough question, I think, is really, really powerful because it gives us an opportunity to support again and coach our children. And so there are certain things that we don't even recognize are a challenge or are difficult for our children because we're not having these conversations. We're just completely shutting it down. But like if self-image is an issue and we just take the phone, that issue's still there. And this is an opportunity to practice with a coach, with a parent. And so we can say, okay, after you watch those videos, I noticed you making a lot of comparisons. Like, let's talk about that. Like, let's chat about that. So it's not about taking our children completely out of certain situations, but empowering them because they're teenagers. They're going to, that feeling, whatever those underlying things beneath the behaviors are still going to come up, whether it's with tech or like you said, whether it's in another area of their life. So it really just is cool the way you frame this to be like, not so much how much, but okay, if we're doing screen time, how can we actually make this an opportunity for us to learn, grow, and connect? So I love that. Thank you.
And it might be that actually some platforms are a problem for some kids in some moments and then not in others, or that, the way that we think about screen time, like one of the things that's been so cool is embracing this coaching role as we've been creating resources to really talk to teens about the habits. We ask them what habits they want to change for themselves. And this has been so interesting to me because so consistently, they pick things that I wouldn't have even thought to necessarily hand down to them, or we start collaborating on solutions that are just end up in a much more interesting place. So like I'm thinking about a teen who's like, the thing that's most meaningful for my well-being would be if I could stop like monitoring where my boyfriend is on Snap Map.
Wow.
And you think about just like, if you just start and stop the conversation with screen time, like, gosh, you missed such an opportunity to talk about that, to talk about like those feelings. And why is it that that's tempting? And why might we want to do that or not want to do that? And what does a healthy relationship look and feel like? So that's like one that comes to mind. I also think that when we create space for different kinds of conversations, we end up being the people that our kids can come to strategize around like the hard stuff that can get amplified by tech in a variety of ways. So a big one that's been on our minds recently has been hearing from teens about how hard it is if they get a text from a friend, let's say, or a message from a friend. And it's like, let's say it's like 10 p.m. and you've got to like put your phone away, or 9 p.m., whatever. You have to put your phone away. You're going to go to bed. You're like, I have a test tomorrow or like a basketball game. But your friend texts you and they're like, I'm not good. I'm not okay. And now you have like your feelings of empathy pulling you to your screen. It's not just that you have like bad screen time habits. It's that like the very values that we've been cultivating, like being a good friend and being thoughtful and being empathetic, like those things are actually now pulling you to your screen. And the reality is that because of what we know is happening with teens' mental health and the broader mental health crisis, teens today are actually, I would say, as likely, if not more likely than ever, to have friends and peers who are struggling, even if they're not struggling themselves. So this is kind of like a hidden toll of the mental health crisis, that there's this big social support burden on our young people's shoulders. And it can be really amplified by the kind of like around the clock nature of people reaching out for help or crying out in kind of ambiguous ways or explicit ways on social media. So just like yet another moment when I think what we want to have done is opened up the lines of communication and that coaching relationship so they know, like, come to me. That is a burden I don't want you to carry alone.
Yeah, I really want to talk about, when you're saying communication, I want to talk about some of the language, because I know that that is difficult for some parents, but you just made me think of an example, and with my daughter specifically, when you told me some of the things that the teens were sharing and why it's like so important for us to have language and have communication. When we first started like figuring out what the screen time limits were going to be and stuff like that, I'm sitting down on the couch and like her screen time had gone off, and it was maybe like an hour later. She comes and she sits on the couch beside me, and she's just like, my body feels weird when I'm bored. And we were able to discover that. And I'm like, that's something I didn't know until I was an adult. Like, yes, you are noticing your body being dysregulated. And when we have more coaching conversations, it really does teach our children to think more critically and to have more presence and more awareness of themselves within their environment. And so I just thought that was really cool that she like noticed that, and how brilliant of the conversation after that was, because now I don't have to force anything. Like, you are consciously aware of how your body feels when you spend too much time on screens and not enough time in nature or creating or whatever. Like, it feels uncomfortable to be bored because of something that you love. And so we're not going to get rid of it, but let's find the balance for you. And she was able to come to that on her own, I think, because of the communication. But I also know that that is challenging and that is difficult. And I know that you are very good at supporting the language. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay, but Destiny, before we talk about the language, I feel like you're probably doing something else that is a really helpful move that other people might want to try also, or just have in the back of their minds, which is, I bet that one reason that your daughter was able to do that and brought that to you was because she did not think, she knew you wouldn't just instinctively take her phone away from her. And I think like so often we have kids, like if they do open up to us at all to share something that's hard about screen time, there's this like reaction to just like pluck the phone out of their hands or like be like, well, this is why you should have less screen time. And my guess is that actually she knew that you were going to be able to hold that she was having this experience, and also that the screen time was not going to necessarily be in jeopardy. And that's why she was able to talk to you. So I think that that's really important too.
Yeah.
All right, language.
Again, it goes back to duality, and then being able to trust that like you see and recognize that this is a beneficial thing for them. And in your home, I think like we have to remember that this is a community, right? And so the narrative, the language, our interactions are very much about like teamwork. So at the end of the day, she understands, both my kids understand, like whatever is happening is us against the issue, and we're going to figure it out. I'm not going to figure it out for you. We are going to figure it out. So I imagine, yeah, that probably did have something to do with it. Thank you.
We talk about like the pivot from us versus them to us and them with tech, which is like, I think something most of us feel in our parenting in general, but it like breaks down around tech for some reason. And suddenly it's like us versus our kid around the tech, and the kind of like us and them approach. Like I have a 5-year-old, and I even use that approach. Like you can use that approach from such a young age. So one of the big things we've been trying to do is help build her own agency and skills around turning off the device, which is such a real, like, that's actually really hard. Like screens are fun. It's hard to stop doing fun things in the middle. And so part of like how that looks in my house right now is I ask her to find a pause point. So when it's like getting close to the end, I'll be like, okay, we're going to look for a pause point. And she's kind of like searching for it. And it's like, we've talked about like the end of the song, the end of it, like what's a pause point? And so many of the design decisions of these tech companies have removed natural pause points, but using that language, we can like help our kids look for them. And so now it's like it might mean that I give her a few extra minutes, or like, you know, an extra couple of minutes, and I'm like kind of hovering to remind her. But so she's like actually doing the button by herself. And it's been pretty amazing to see it. It's not always easy, and sometimes she can't do it and she needs like my help to hold the boundary, but it's really interesting to see how empowered she feels, and like she's proud of herself when she shuts off the button by herself. And I get that.
I love that. Absolutely, so much. That's just pretty much what I've seen in my household as well. Let's talk about some of the other language and just there were so many things that you shared and that I was able to see in advance, like things like Como and technoference. I want to hear you share these things because I was reading them. I'm just like, this makes so much sense. This makes so much sense. I can't wait to introduce this to my kids. I can't wait to implement this. And I know that it'll be super helpful and beneficial to our audience today.
Okay, well, we should say there's all the terms that we're going to talk about and more, I think, are in the toolkit. So people can reference and refer back to them. But one of the things that we've been really interested in is just, we know there's this kind of, you might have heard this term like name it to tame it. It's such a real thing to be able to identify what a feeling is so that we can recognize it in ourselves and talk about it with others. And we're talking about the importance of conversation, but if we don't have the right language, sometimes it can be hard to even figure out how to have the conversation or start it. So one of the things our team at the Center for Digital Thriving has been really excited about is like thinking about what terms teens are already using or what terms are in the psychology literature that we can connect to their experiences. So this is not from the psychology literature, the first one, Como, but the idea is Como, you might have heard of, most of us have probably heard of FOMO, fear of missing out, and maybe JOMO, joy of missing out. But Como is like actually the knowledge that you're missing out. And this is something that is really amplified and reinforced by social media. Maybe you see a picture on stories or a video clip, or you see like your friends clustered together on a live map, or you see Venmo transactions. So you like find out they all like went to the movies together. Social media has actually created tons of new kinds of social information. And this can be especially hard for teens because they're actually developmentally primed to be really curious about their peers. And their friendships are often directly connected to their sense of self during this stage of life. So feeling left out by your friends, or like you might be sort of getting excluded from the group, that can actually feel like a real kind of identity threat. And Como is just a term that I think helps us get at that reality that there is just so much social information that kids and teens are now managing.
So personally, I feel like I've experienced that. I'm sure people are gonna be like, yeah, of course, I've heard that. Not so much with like what they're seeing on social media, but like the Como of different values and limits and boundaries in different households. And my daughter is going into public school for the first time. She hasn't been in public school since kindergarten. And I already have heard, like with her cousins or with her friends, like she knows what they're able to do and what they're doing versus what she's doing. And so I think that kind of is like a challenge for parents in terms of like, I'm empowering you, and at the same time, everybody's capable. Like, how do you express that to a child? Like, your capabilities are different, family values are different. How do you express that while still keeping the connection and still keeping them feeling empowered?
Yeah, your instinct also to go to values, I think is such a good one. That's like in some of the resources that we've created, we talk about tech and values and connecting them much more intentionally than most of us do, because it's such a helpful frame. And so we have this value sort activity that we've just found parents and teens love. We created it initially for classrooms, but the idea is that you actually look at a whole list of values and you think about and you ask your teen, like, what are the values that are most important to you right now? And that's a starting point. And I'll just say, even from that, I'm like hearing from parents that they're like, I had no idea that my son would say that like kindness and justice were his top values. Like that was so interesting to me. I learned something new about him. Um, and then we have you actually talk about like how different values are supported by tech and how they're made harder by tech. And it's such a good lead in to conversations about our habits, because the reason we want to think about our screen time and cultivate mindful habits, it's not just arbitrary. It's actually because we want to be able to live in ways that are values aligned and that support our well-being and our agency. And it can be really hard to do that. So just like helping us align and helping us orient the conversation, anchor it in values, it's just such a good starting point.
That helps. That helps a lot because in my house, we do have values conversations. In my parenting and also in my coaching, we do exactly that. Like we sit down with a list of values and we go and what are your kids' values and all of that. And so my daughter is familiar with that conversation. I think I've focused it more on like skills development and like we're all different and we all develop differently. But I think that that will resonate even more, like for her to like be reminded like, well, no, this is what's important to me. And me and my mom sat down to come up with what actually helps support my well-being based on tech. So thank you so much for that. I know there was another one. I think, what were the other ones that you had that are like these little forms of lingo that we can use and relate with our kids in tech?
Okay, so there are two different terms that are being used more and more in research related to a very familiar experience, one that probably everyone here has had. So, when you're talking with someone and they're on their phone, like typing a message or looking at something on their screen, and you just feel like they're not really paying attention to you. Like if you were looking at your phone right now while I was even giving you this explanation, I would be like, oh, like, wow, like what the heck? So the first term is technoference, which is like technology plus interference. And the other is phubbing, like phone plus snubbing. Maybe people have heard these terms just being used. They're also actually making their way into the research. And the basic idea is, in both cases, is to be more aware of moments when tech actually interferes with our in-person connections, when we're accidentally signaling to the people that we're with that whatever is on our screen is more important to us than they are. I know this really hits home for me as a mom. And I saw a clip actually, Destiny, of you talking about how you've coached your daughters on giving you feedback around technoference and using the like phrase of "I didn't appreciate." I feel like you should give that language to everyone because I mean, I think this is actually something that we do in our parenting, teens do back to their parents. So how did you give your daughters guidance on how to talk to you about this?
Well, it really comes back to like the values conversation. And in my household, like I do live in this space of duality. So there's not like a lot of this is right or this is wrong. It's just we're in a community and we all have preferences. And so I communicate, like I prefer for you not to leave your shoes on the ground. We live in a community. Can you pick your shoes up? Like things like that, as opposed to you're a bad kid, you're lazy, judgments, right? And so I also enjoy receiving feedback in the same way. Like I think that in terms of like nonviolent communication, it helps just the other person when we are more so sportscasting how we feel or how we interpret a behavior versus trying to actually label the behavior as good or bad. And so I've taught them like, yes, please advocate for yourself. If I'm doing something, tell me. Maybe a way that it'll be better received by myself or by adults or by your friends is if you frame it in this way. I appreciate blank. I like blank. I prefer blank. Is it okay if blank? As opposed to you shouldn't be doing this. Like nobody wants to be talked at. And so I'm a content creator. My job is on tech, and I work from home. And my daughter was homeschooled. So she, in her mind, she's like, your screen time habits are awful. You're always on your phone. You're always on tech. And she's right. And so there are definitely like this resonates so much because there are definitely moments where it's like, why are you answering a comment? We're at the park. Like, or worse, why are you online having a conversation about connected parenting and like you're right next to a kid
No.
you're connecting to? And so being intentional about what we're modeling, of course, there's a piece of it where it's like the person that we're supposed to be connecting with is not receiving this well, but also being intentional about what am I modeling and what is my behavior with tech showing my child, I think is something that is really important for us to also be paying attention to.
That makes me think of this story that I haven't thought about in a long time, but just when you were, I actually think about it from time to time, but I haven't thought about it so recently. But it's like such a gut punch to me, which was one of our colleagues was doing a project with, I think it was with elementary schoolers, and they were redesigning playgrounds. And the idea was like to make a change to the playground to make it more fun. It was like a playground at a park, and you could do anything that you wanted. And the idea that the kids had of what they wanted to change was a box that the parents had to put their phones in. It wasn't a slide. It wasn't like a new set of swings. It wasn't like more equipment. It was literally just like, we want our parents to play with us. Can they put their phones in the box? And I think the reality is like tech is both. We're not going to be able to get technoference to zero. Sometimes I'm like on my phone because I'm responding to the like 57th email from school about something that's directly related to like helping the kids. But I think that just like reminder, like having that in our heads of like our kids, like they want our attention, and we want to be the parents that don't need the box on the playground, right? Like I think that hits home for me.
Oh my goodness. I actually made a video kind of similar to this recently, though, but I think that a lot of parents would be surprised to see just how many activities our children would actually prefer than their phones if they were facilitated and participated by us with.
Mm,
And it's kind of like just this idea that for a lot of kids, in many ways, their smartphones in this society and day and age are like forms of like coping strategies. And
yeah.
so you are taking something that is a coping strategy, whether that is their music or connecting with people or being creative, but you're not willing to have a replacement for that. Essentially, we are like kind of leaving them in the dark a little bit, you know? And so when we started to pull back on the screens, and like I was very intentional about, I'm not gonna just say like just go color or like go read a book. Like we really started to amp up like I would read to her, or we're going to like color together, or let's go for a walk. Those kinds of things. I think that it's really important, like that they want that time with us. And I guarantee you, as much as my daughter loves her phone, if I say, hey, let's play Uno, or hey, how about instead of being on the phone with your friend, I'm willing to take you all to the
Let's do
park.
it.
She'll be like, yes, please, can we go get her? So I just think that that's like a really good, important piece for us to also acknowledge that like they want to connect with the rest of their environment, but we're still here to help and facilitate and scaffold that. So that's really important. We have been like running our mouths, and I know that we have to get to the
No.
day, but I do really, really want to just give you an opportunity to talk about this really, really quickly. The idea of like cognitive distortions and
Mm.
thinking traps. I think that that is something that comes up a lot in my community and with parents and their children. And so if you could just speak to that really quick, and then I promise y'all we will get to Q&A.
All right. Okay. So in our work with teens, we've heard teens describing these kinds of anxious spirals that can come up with social media that are actually very familiar to us because they're basically cognitive distortions that are being amplified by tech. So in our resources, we call them thinking traps just because we found that language feels more accessible. It resonates more with teens. But if you're familiar with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, you'll recognize many of them. And maybe I'll ask someone to just drop the link to our social media thinking traps glossary that we co-created with teens and psychologists and teachers. But we've heard teens say things like, when I am like left on red, I start to worry that I said something wrong, or that the person's mad at me, or that they think I'm a loser, or like that we're not friends anymore. And I think like adults can probably relate to this kind of second guessing. Teens actually were talking to us. They called it like second and even like third guessing yourself when you're left on red and you're like just down this total thinking spiral. And that's actually a lot of those thoughts that I named, like they must think I am, like those are examples of mind reading. And others come up when we say things like everyone has more friends than me because that's a trap that gets magnified when it looks on our feed, like everyone else has like a million friends and is always out socializing. So in the spirit of name it to tame it, we've been collaborating with, like I said, like teens and teachers and psychologists, colleagues at KQED and Common Sense on a suite of resources about thinking traps. And one of the things that I love is this like 8-minute explainer video that actually just talks about like what thinking traps are and how they're completely normal and they can come up when we're using social media. They can be amplified by it. But oh my gosh, one thing that I feel like I've seen is just like giving teens this language of these different thinking traps and normalizing the experiences. It's so validating. And it really like there is something that happens when we just have the language to talk about like, oh, I'm left on red. Now I'm on the spiral because I'm mind reading. But like, wait, what are the alternative explanations for what might be going on? Or like, why maybe their phone died. Maybe like I can kind of do some cognitive restructuring for myself. I mean, you don't have to call it that, but like I can really shift my self-talk once I recognize it.
Yes, absolutely. Like, I mean, obviously, we didn't call them thinking traps in our house, but I love that, and I'm going to. She's like distortions, but so I'm definitely going to use that language. But for me in our home, the two things that I've seen that have made a major difference with the name entertainment and giving her that language. Number one is a shift in emotional regulation because you're right. Once I can like say this, I'm able to talk through it, and I'm able to kind of have a more rational understanding of the picture. The other part of that has been an increase in her self-esteem, even in this like weird, murky, rocky phase,
Yeah.
because I think that them having the language for thinking traps allows them to separate themselves from their behavior and themselves from their anxiety, right? And
A
so
hundred
even
percent.
this morning, she was telling me about like her fears with going into middle school. And she's talking, and I'm like empathizing, and then we're continuing to talk. And I was like, what do you think is happening right now? Like, what do you think? Like, tell me which distortion. And she was like, yeah, I am catastrophizing. Okay, obviously I'm gonna make friends. Like, so I don't necessarily have to give her the like. She's like, you know what? Yes, I am good at making friends. It actually is ridiculous for me for that to be the thing that I'm worried about. And so I think that it is really empowering and just coming back to the idea that I'm coaching, like I'm not refereeing, I'm not shutting down the feeling or the
Right.
thinking. I'm just giving you an opportunity to find your way to the truth and the reality of the situation rather than falling into those traps. So I love that. I love that so much. And
And sometimes even just actually there's something else there's like a third thing too, which is that when we realize there's actually a term, it's like a signal to us that we're not the only one who feels a certain way or who does a certain thing. Like I remember when people started talking about doom scrolling and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, like wow, everyone's doing it. Like this is that's so helpful to know that other people are doing that. And I really do think that when we share the language for something, like when we're like, oh, like fubbing or oh, whatever it is, like mind reading or catastrophizing, like we're signaling like these are normal experiences that we can talk about and work on together. You're not the only one who feels this way. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling this way, but also let's work on it together.
and can I just say that like no shade to the language itself, but the idea of it like being a trap as in something that I can just move myself out of as opposed to like a distortion, like there's something wrong. I don't know. I'm not no shade to the original language, but I just think that that's brilliant. Like it's not me, it's where I'm at. So let me get somewhere else. I just think that that's great.
That's so nice. It's like it's so much fun to do the work. And then it's just like there's something kind of magic about getting to know that it actually resonates with people and that it might be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I don't know. What are you thinking? Do you think we should?
Should we take some questions? I feel like we said we would. We definitely should.
You think? Should we? Yes, we definitely should.
Let's
Absolutely.
do it. Okay. Um, all right. I'll read the question and then I don't know who this is for, but we'll tackle it together. Okay. So this is so nice. I'm so impressed by both of your thoughtfulness. I aspire to do the same, but I am a mess with my own habits. Can you break down some easy steps to take to start the process of being more thoughtful?
Okay, you shoot first because I'm processing.
Okay. So I think, first of all, if I was walking you through kind of our habits checkup, we would actually have you identify one habit that you most want to change. I think sometimes like tech habits, it just feels really big, but there's something about being able to identify something specific. So I would ask you, what is like one tech habit that you want to change? And then we would walk you through actually designing an experiment for yourself to try changing just that one habit. So some of the things we know from habit science around like habit change are we want to get really specific about the change. We want to identify for ourselves, like, why is this important? How would your life be better if you actually changed that habit? So being able to identify that. And then as you think about what your experiment is, you want to actually try and add friction so that the thing that you're doing automatically without even maybe meaning to is harder to do, or remove friction so the thing you want to do is easier. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're like, I really want to in the morning when I wake up, like instead of having the first thing I do be like look at Reddit, I want to put on my sneakers and just like go for a 10-minute walk. So some of the ways you might be like, okay, so for the next 10 days, I'm going to try just doing an experiment. And if I don't feel any better, I'll just go back to how I'm doing things right now. But I'm going to do an experiment of like 10 minutes in the morning, going for a walk. Who knows if this will help. That experiment mindset or challenge mindset, I think is so helpful. And then I'd be like, okay, so the things I might need to do are, number one, I'm often like on Reddit before I even realize I am. So I'm going to like move my phone out of arm's reach. That might mean I need to like get a clock on to put on my nightstand or like an alarm clock. But I might also be like, okay, I'm going to put my sneakers right next to my bed, or like, I'm going to like figure out how to actually put my coffee maker on like the automatic setting. So I have like another motivation to get out of bed right away. So just thinking about how to get as specific as possible. And one of the things that's so cool is that as we change one habit, we realize that we can change more. So don't feel like you have to change, like do a revamp of every tech habit at once. Like you can go big if you want, like some people love a detox like altogether, but if you want to just try a small change, that can be a really meaningful thing too.
Okay, that was perfect.
No, but you're gonna level it up. I know you're gonna level it up.
So I was actually talking about this today in my group. And so specifically when it comes to our habits, there's three things kind of at play. Like, first of all, it's self-awareness, like a lack of self-awareness, or then there's a lack of tools. And that's kind of what you just were speaking of. And then that's typically where we get stuck, right? Like I need to form a new habit. I need to do X, Y, and Z. But the third piece of that, I guess I'll round it out, is typically it's support. And so for me, I think that a big piece of me being able to form new habits has been the level of support that I've been willing to be intentional about cultivating. And that looks like asking for help. That looks like curating my environment so that it supports me and stopping to like not always trying to, change me, but also being like, wait, this actually isn't a great environment for me to change in, right? And then the third piece of that would be creating boundaries. So if you're like, I've read all the books and I know what I need to do, but I'm struggling with habits. I know for me personally, that thoughtfulness started to change and habits started to be able to form when I was like, wait, my environment isn't actually like supporting this. And so I think that maybe that rounds it out, that maybe it's not that you don't have the right information. Maybe it's not that you're not capable. Maybe it really is like more of a support issue. And I know that's not something that is easy to figure out, but I hope that that at least gives you like some sort of like, okay, maybe instead of trying to focus on these habits, maybe I need to focus on the habit of creating a more sustainable, more supportive environment for myself first. And then probably all this other stuff will be a bit easier.
Yeah, that's so true. We have like in that habits kind of challenge, like resource we actually have kids identify who can help them because we know that social support is so real. It's so meaningful. And it's been really interesting because we've gone to observe some teachers actually teaching the habit sort of challenge, like this, taking kids through the sequence of like identifying the habit they want to change and making a challenge. And like, as you'd expect, there's a lot of variation. Like for some kids, this activity works so well. They like change their habit. They're so empowered. And others are like, they don't care about it. They don't want to try. They're annoyed. Like, leave me alone. I don't want to do anything. And it's one of the things that I feel like we've thought was really interesting to see in action is that one of the ways that teachers get their students sort of into that first category is when they go into that coaching mindset and they really lean into the, like, we're in this together. So they might ask kids, like, they might actually share something that they want to change about their own tech habits and let the kids like give them advice, and they brainstorm together and they really like push the kids to think about a habit that is really meaningful to them to change. And then like like a challenge that would feel like something they want to do, not just something that's like yet another kind of like chore on our to-do list. So I think like being available to give the social support and then giving it with that coaching spirit it just can go such a long way.
For sure. Do you see I think
Yeah.
there's
Okay. Okay. So a question from Michael. Given your extensive work with teenagers, how do you perceive the potential for developing digital literacy and healthy technology habits in elementary age children? I really believe that these are dispositions and skills and literacies that we can start much, much earlier than most of us are thinking about. I mean, like so many of the dispositions that we want kids to have that we think of as being like the basis for having digital agency, like those things can start so young as we're talking about our values. Like in elementary school age kids, we talk about what our values are. So we can start talking about that. They are super aware of things like social norms around tech. Like they notice how it feels to them using different kinds, when other people are on their devices, but also how they can feel after different kinds of screen time. Like we can have those conversations to start cultivating mindful habits. I have some colleagues who are even thinking about like what algorithmic literacy looks like at an elementary age level. So how do we talk to kids about like algorithms and like the idea that like robots are all around us? I mean, like little kids are for sure interacting with Siri. So like how do we explain like or Siri, Alexa, like how do we explain like what is Siri? What is Alexa? And so starting those kinds of conversations and having them together, like, yes, for sure we can do that with elementary age kids.
That makes me feel good. That makes me feel encouraged, but I would hope that there is potential there because they're using it. So I think that's great. Thank you.
Okay, Destini, I think this one's for you. Can you walk us through a tech meeting with your kids, like how you schedule it, how you talk about it, what you do during it?
Yes, absolutely. So my oldest and I are very intentional about like meetings in general. Like we have like family meetings all the time and check-ins. My youngest is sort of starting to go into that. But for us, a tech meeting, we had an initial conversation, right? Like this is what it's gonna be when we not when we introduced the phone, but when I realized like, whoa, I'm in over my head. This is too much. We had like an initial conversation. We talked about our values. We talked about what was important. For me, that conversation is always important to lead with the positive and with her strengths, take accountability if I need to. And I always frame it as like, my concern is X, Y, and Z. So how can we figure this out? And it's really kind of just rinse and repeat as things happen. And so sometimes a tech talk will happen because like recently we have an issue or there's a new conflict or something like that. And so whenever that happens, if it's a safety thing, then I'm like, all right, pause. Like this one was a safety issue. And so I'm not really very big on like taking devices. That's not my thing. But I was at work and she was with me and I was like, all right, Ken, I'm just like, give me the phone. It's not you. I don't have a solution right now. You know, we're going to figure it out. Right. But we don't have a solution right now. So just give me the phone. We scheduled a tech talk. She held me to it and we sat down and we talked about what my concern was. I empowered her. I gave her information and I was like, okay, this is where we're at now. You have used this application. And so explain to me why, and maybe we can find something else. Or these are the skills that are required and necessary for you to be able to use this. So maybe we can't use this right now, but great, boom, it's here. So now that means we're going to work on these skills. And so the conversation typically is, this is what my concern is. This is what our plan is going to be moving forward, yada, yada, yada. And we're collaborating on that together. And so I'm at the end of the conversation, though, it's always like, we're a team. If this isn't working, guess what? We can come right back to this conversation because we'll figure it out. And so that's typically what our tech talks look like. Do you have any recommendations for tech talks?
Well, not for you, but maybe I think you're rocking it. But I think that I'll just name a couple, maybe put some language to a couple of things that I think you're describing that also are really good coaching moves. So one is we talk about the power of assessing the situation before you call the play. And I think that you really did that when you got curious. You were willing to say like, I don't know yet. Like I need a pause. And So first of all, like you were doing your own kind of like self-regulation and figuring out how you were feeling and what was going on, but you also then asked questions so you could, it sounds like, so you could understand like what had actually happened. And one thing that we see often in our families, but also in schools, it's like there's this like jump to consequences, because I think a lot of us feel like the missteps with tech, they can really be so high stakes, and it makes us scared. And that fear drives us to just want to like act and react rather than actually getting curious and creating space. And so just like assess the situation before you call the play, or like we sometimes talk about like the pivot from assuming to asking. So I think I know what happened here, but I want to make sure I really understand. It doesn't mean that you don't end up with some kind of like new boundary or something that you need to change, but I think that's just like such a power move. The other thing is that it like occurred to me in listening to you that another coaching move that you use is like you're okay to you give yourself like permission to change your mind. And I think that is something that so many of us just like, we feel like we have to like make that there's one right way to do things. And I think like the way we talk about tech and the way that it's talked about often in the media and on social media is like, it feels like if you don't like say the script just right, or if you don't like do exactly what, exactly this like one thing that everyone's saying you should do, that everything is like, forget it. It's like, it's all over. And I think that it's okay that like sometimes we might try something and then we might have to backpedal. We might have to be like, I thought this was going to work for our family, but it's not working. Let's like take a beat and let's like revisit it. And that like really, it's great if we can do like gradual release from the get-go. So like introducing new technologies one at a time. So there's like space to like practice and catch our breath. But sometimes like we introduce something and then we have to just like be like, okay, we thought this was going to go better than it was, like permission to change our mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important in recognizing that like compromising isn't necessarily being permissive if the compromise is still in alignment with your values. Like that, I think it teaches our children creative problem solving. It teaches them how to think critically and how to be adaptable without being out of alignment with who you are and with your morals and your values. So I think that that's really important. I think Ashley had a follow-up
Yeah.
question. When did
When
you
did you
start?
start?
Not what I would have preferred. That little like itching that you just spoke of. Goodness, I wish that we would have had that. It was like I said, I got a phone at 9. So I she got her phone probably around like the same age, like 9 or 10. And I don't think we had like our first tech talk until maybe, well, no, she probably got her first phone at 8. And I think we had our first tech talk at maybe like 10, when her peers were starting to introduce things, because she was homeschooled. So like it's like she's not on her phone looking at things that, she had specific apps, and I could see the apps she had on her phone, but no one was suggesting certain things is what I'm
Right.
trying to say basically. So we started having the tech talk when the conversations of like, my friend has Instagram, or my friend is able to watch YouTube shorts. Like that's when we started to have that conversation. So it wasn't necessarily a backpedal. She was more so coming to me like, hey, my friends don't have to tell their parents who they're subscribed to. Like, what's up with that? Like, so as her community started to grow and her values, she started to question certain values. That's when we started to have it. So it was still proactive because nothing specific had happened yet. But that's when she started to compare her screens and her tech usage to like the people in her environment.
Totally. And but wherever people are, I mean, it's not too late. Like you can start doing this in your relationship, in like your romantic relationship. Like it's not too late to talk about, to start talking about tech, like with your friends, with your kids. But also if you have little kids, I think even conversations about like, what is an ad? Like on kids who watch YouTube, they're like seeing ads. Like, what is an ad? It's actually like an interruption from the show. It's not part of the show. Like that's actually like a part of media literacy and tech talks that we can start really young. Okay.
We have
Jess,
a question
I think for you, for both of us. I
for
really
both of us.
like I really like the pivot from referee to coach. Are there any other pivots that I should be thinking about for conversations with my kids about tech? Do you want to start?
Are there any other pivots I should be thinking about for our conversations with my kids about tech? I think you kind of pointed out one earlier, and it kind of goes not just with tech. I know that's like your specific wheelhouse, so I'll go macro, you can go micro.
Okay.
The idea of, instead of making judgments, asking questions, I think that that can save you a lot. And so I do something that is called sports casting with my daughter often. And it's really just noticing. And I think that it's why she came and sat on the couch and was like, I noticed that like my body feels weird right now, right? So this keeps me out of lecture. That's my that's my go-to parenting faux pas is lecturing and like the being critical. And so just noticing, like leading with a notice. And I noticed you've been on your phone a while. Like, what's up? Or I noticed that when you got off your phone, your energy was different or your energy changed. Like, what's up? I think that adding that into the conversation has been really helpful in opening the conversation. And I know that teens don't always want to communicate, but it at least gives them an opportunity to be more reflective on their habits and how like that balance between their screens and their well-being is. Noticing in sportscasting versus coming in with judgments and assumptions, I think has been really helpful for us, a really helpful pivot.
I love that. Okay, pivots are like this is the complete thing that our team has been so focused on, so interested in. My colleague Beck and I taught a May term class at Harvard this year that the whole course was about pivots around tech, like these essential mind shifts. So I have many. I'd love to talk to you more about them if you want to reach out, but I'll just share one, which is the shift from an abstinence mindset to an agency mindset about tech. So it feels to me like a lot of the conversations that we have around tech right now with kids, they really are echoing and sort of carrying forward this abstinence model, this idea that the best goal would be no use, would be like no screen time. And so we talk about like total bans and total restrictions. And it's not that boundaries are not really important, they are, but the shift from abstinence to agency gets us thinking like, what would it look like to build kids agency around their tech habits, to build their agency so that when they're using these technologies, they're using them in empowered ways with intentionality. And I think that pivot from abstinence to agency is also kind of a relief for a lot of us, because a lot of screen time guilt, I think, is coming from the sense that we have that abstinence should be the goal. But first of all, we know a lot from research on abstinence-only messaging about the ways that it falls short in other areas. And I think that this is another area where like it can be really motivating for all of us and helpful to embrace agency as a name.
Okay, so you made me think of one more thing really, really quickly that was a pivot for me when you said that. It's very similar, but shifting from the idea that like screens are like a treat or a prize or like they're not necessarily integrated. It's like after like you do the important stuff like your chores and your homework, then you can have this wonderful thing. And it's really not teaching them how to have a more integrated approach to how they're utilizing their screen. So yes, thank you.
Okay, I think that is a perfect note to end on, and I'm noticing we're at time. So I want to wrap things up. Thank you to everyone who came. Thank you for asking questions. Thank you for your attention today. And special thanks, Destini, to you for sharing your experiences and your warmth and your expertise and your stories. Thanks also to the Harvard Chan Center for Health Communication for hosting this session. And I know that their team also wanted to thank Social Current for their marketing partnership on these briefings. And please keep an eye out in your inbox for the accompanying toolkit that we put together based on today's discussion. And again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your interest in this topic and for sharing it with your communities.